What I'd like to do is ask you about what are we doing today that in 2073 humans are just going to look back and say, what were they thinking? What are we doing wrong today that the people of the future are just going to say, my goodness, what in the world?
And that's why I love this question, because I do, as a futurist, I actually work with historians all the time. I work with a cultural historian. I wrote a book with a cultural historian, Jamie Carrot. The name of the book is Vintage Tomorrows. And what they will tell you is that history doesn't repeat itself. History is the language we use to talk about the future. Because we don't have a language. We can only use the language of the past to talk about the future. That's why the past is so important, but then understanding that difference between the past and the future, I think, is great. And so for me, when I start to think about it, we look out to 2073, I kind of go back to, again, a little bit of the past. I go back to the QWERTY keyboard. So hopefully everybody remembers the QWERTY keyboard. If you look down at your keyboard, or if you pull it up, that's the keyboard that, right, it says QWERTY across the upper left corner of your keyboard. It says QWERTY. The history of the QWERTY keyboard, of course, it wasn't with computers. Of course, it came from typewriters. And why was the QWERTY keyboard laid out like that with a typewriter? Well, because it was trying to slow human beings down. The idea, as you remember, you've got the typewriter, and it had the little arms that was whack, 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 whacking, right? And you had all those things. If many of you had the typewriter, if not, you can search it online. That's why we created the internet, so you can look up this crazy stuff. Look at the mechanical action of a typewriter. It's those arms. And so, if the human being typed very quickly, they would go over each other, and it would gum up the words. And so, the QWERTY keyboard was designed to slow human beings down, so that we would have this normal pace of typing. And so that got adopted. It wasn't the only keyboard. That got adopted. And over the years, people have tried to bring in different ones, but that got adopted. And so then it got brought into our computers, which is insane. We were actually using an industrial age input device to slow us down. There's no keys anymore. There's no arms that would get messed up anymore. There's no reason for us to have this except for history, for us to understand how to interact with this amazing piece of technology that has ones and zeros on it. And then as we kind of move forward, we even have it on our devices where we're not even using all of our fingers. We're just using our thumbs. And we're using a very similar thing. So for me, the ridiculousness of that is that we're always sort of bringing this in, using the past to kind of teach us and how we interact with these amazing devices and technologies. I think as we look out into the future, how we interact with our devices, this idea that we had keyboards, this idea that we had just screens, this idea of how technology was something that was separate and it was all these devices and all these things. Because one of the things I'm starting to see happen, and that I can't wait to happen, is we're starting to not use keyboards, right? We can just talk. So human beings are good at. We talk to each other. There's nuances in our speech and in our languages and in our cultures that sort of show the sort of wonderful complexity of what it means to be a human. And right now, our devices don't understand that at all. Our devices are just trying to get the word right. And so there's so much more communication and so much more language there for our ability to talk to our devices and for our devices to talk to us, and then for us then to talk to other people, also people who may not even know our language or may not know our culture. It becomes really interesting. And then as you move it a little bit forward, and this is something that I've written about called relationship computing, where you start to understand that your devices value you as a human, and they value you and they understand you in a way. So that you're interacting with them. So just living in your house is a way of programming the house. It knows you more. And understanding if you're in a good mood, if you're in a bad mood, understanding that I always talk about you could optimize an elevator. People talk about the Internet of Things and smart devices and smart buildings. I'm like, here's a really smart building. I want an elevator that when I get in to go to work, and I'm going up or I've got a meeting or whatever, and the elevator knows that I'm in a bad mood, I want that elevator to tell me a dad joke. Like, that would be awesome. Because I love dad jokes, right? I love dad jokes. I tell them all the time because kids love them, right? And so that idea of understanding the complexity of what it means. And so this idea that we had keyboards, that we talked to our things, that we had these devices, that how we interact with it and how our technology understands with it, there's all these barriers that we have as a legacy of the past. And as we move into the future, I think as we start to, how we even conceptualize our technologies that it looks really fundamentally different, because if we do it right, and again, we need to build the future, and we will build the future. And I always push my students and everybody to say, if we're building it right and we keep humans at the center of the technology, and technology is there to serve us and then also to connect us with people, that becomes, that relationship that we have becomes really interesting, and it really embraces the complexity of what it means to be human.